While looking at the market, we all understand the fact that it's not moving. We agree on that point. Last couple of weeks, or at least last 3 weeks, has been slow. But that does not mean that we are away from this. It does not mean we are going to act like this. The market always play through this scenario. It has a day and a night. It goes through seasons for sure. If you get a up, then you are going to see a down. So it literally is something which we all have to understand. If you are ready to learn, what you should understand is we always get a summer, we always get a spring. What we all have to keep in mind is that we always get the summer, after which we get the fall. Then we go into the winter. But remember, we are coming back with that spring. We are coming back into the structure of a summer that goes like this, and it gets repeated over and over again. You get the summer, you get the fall, and then the hard winter, after which we get the spring, we go back. So if that's the storyline, where do you think we are right now? Just don't get confused when people in the market give you the thought process that we are going down, because if this is the history which has repeated again and again and again, you now have to ask this question to yourself: where the hell are we right now? Welcome to the Scientific Investor family, where the normal retail guys get to learn how to become the next top 10% of this world. Now, what we just discussed is about Bitcoin macro perspective. And that kind of gives us the narrative, like always you come down this range, you consolidate below this range. We call it accumulation in the Wyckoff. And we understand like, okay, once we break higher, we are starting the next move up, which is the mark-up phase. It can be highly volatile like what we saw here, or it can be a smooth, slow, steady grind to the upside. Whatever the case is, you need to understand the fact that the market does do miracles. If you're in the bank, you're never watching ROI like this. But if you're in the market, you may need a ton of patience, then a ton of discipline. Otherwise, it's not coming to you. Now, if you are in XRP, you need to understand the fact that the market is showing us something. We discussed about this scenario before, right? As we were moving higher, we were getting the signals, we were clearly showing like, okay, this is what I'm thinking about the market. This is what we are looking for in the market, right? But the amount of negativity in the market is still huge. Why? Because we are still in the phase of disbelief. When the market is going up, a lot of people really think like, this is not going to go up. It's going to go back down. And people think like we are going to drop like this. But for XRP, you need to look for what is coming out as the news and narratives, because this is something which we cannot neglect. If we understand the fact that the news, the narratives, the current affairs is changing, we also get the perspective like, okay, the market is going to react with that. But what's the concern? We are looking for dollar, it's at a support, it's kind of getting slowed down at the support. So if that bounces, okay, now that's not a good thing. But then again, you look for the safe haven assets. Gold, it does show us this. We had a rounded bottom, we broke to the upside, we are now retesting and trying to bounce off from that. And that's a weekly chart. So you need to understand the same thing which we discussed about the market cycles. You go up, you have a fall, then you go into the winter. Then you do the accumulation, which is the spring, after which you go for the violent run up, which again is the summer. Now, on the short-term structure, you are getting the same thing. You get what is known as a fall, then the winter, then your accumulation, which is a spring, and you're just starting to move into the summer. Now, if that's fact, which you understand, then first, forget about this. Then, ask the question like, how many of the assets in your portfolio is here versus how many of them are here? because they still haven't done a proper rally. They're still waiting for at least the first rally, which is the disbelief phase. So for that, what you have to do is you literally have to go look at that asset on a macro structure, which would be something like a 3-day chart or a weekly chart, whichever you prefer. You need to at least look for last 2 to 3 years to understand where the market has taken us. This is XRP. We actually went through that same structure. We went into the fall, then we went into the winter. Now, after that, we consolidated there, making it look like an accumulation range. The price stayed inside this range for a long period of time. It's almost like a year which we spent there. After which we broke higher, we are coming back up. Now the question is this sustainable? Because you get the ideology in the market that we are going to come back down, put in a new low, which can be a lower low. So I'm like, okay, we had the period of time which we consolidated here, which is literally around a year. And now you need to go through that supply demand equation to put in a new low. So I'm coming here looking at the perspective like, okay, I'm looking at the 3-day chart, and the 3-day chart suggests me, okay, we got an engulfing candle to the downside, so we may go up and then come back down. So that can be literally a ABC correction, right? But are we going lower into this range, or are we going to get supported somewhere here? We want to know that fact. And that's why we go into a weekly chart. And right now, the weekly chart is showing us a hanging man. And as we all know, hanging man pattern as a price action is not that bullish. We usually get that pattern when the price goes up and then it shows you that sellers are trying to push the price lower. But at this point in time, bulls are getting back, pushing them out. So a weekly is showing you, okay, we are preparing for a little bit of correction. A 3-day chart is showing you, okay, we are heading for an ABC correction, which shows the trend is still your friend and you need to look for supports. Great. Now we go into a daily chart. We are like, okay, we understand the fact that there can be a possible correction. Then the key idea here is if the market narrative is changing for this particular asset right now, then can that invalidate the macro? Based on the charts, I would say no. This is a short-term structure and most likely the higher time frame structure plays out. What does that mean? We may have a correction. Basically, we may come back down to 0.46 if that plays out. For that to get invalidated, what we now need is a break of this range and a close above that, which would be 0.54. We need to break through that range. We need to close above. And that on a 3-day chart, that on a weekly chart would raise what we just saw. Now, why am I giving a possibility for that? This is what is important because as we just talked, 3-day shows you a possible correction. Weekly shows you a possible correction. Great. Now we are going on to an even higher time frame. And this higher time frame structure, which is a monthly, shows me that, okay, we got monthly closes here, monthly wicks here, and it kind of is a strong level to look for, which is kind of somewhere close to 0.48, 0.47. It can be volatile because, this is a monthly. It can still get closed here, close to that range, but still wick lower than that, right? On a daily, a 3-day, a weekly, whatever is the time horizon. But the monthly chart does show you the possibility that it is still trending higher. Now, if it's hard to identify on a candlestick chart, we can easily go on, look at the same thing on a line chart. So we're exactly looking for a double bottom upon a double bottom, which is a textbook double bottom pattern because you get different types of double bottom patterns, right? So what we want to understand is what type of patterns are we looking at. Sometimes the market will actually do things like this, which is the exact same range. You come, you hit the same range, you go back up. So this is the possible scenario there. But then we understand that it's not only pattern which you actually see in the market. Because the textbook sometimes shows you the second bottom can be higher than the first one. That is a big possibility, and we have seen that many times in the market. But XRP on a monthly right now is showing you we got a double bottom here, which is kind of the first textbook pattern, after which it is the second. So I'm like, okay, the monthly is showing me a reversal signal, and last time when it did this, it actually ended up going such highs. But back in the days, we really didn't have the SEC hammering us. But still, after that pattern, we managed to go higher. So right now, when we have the case going and the market is showing, no, we don't care about the SEC because SEC is in the US and this asset is being used worldwide. And with the current scenario, when nations with a ton of population like China, India, Russia, all of them, and then the oil-rich nations like Saudi, Russia, and again, all of these guys coming out and saying, we don't care what the US is thinking. I don't give a damn about that. If that's true, now that means, okay, the market is now changing. The market is saying, okay, we think that currency can be devalued. And if that's the case, you're betting against dollar. This is XRP USDT, which is pegged against the US dollar. So if the value of the US dollar is dropping, then the reserves which they have, they is also getting killed. So basically speaking, there can be a hyperinflation in the price of any asset which is against the dollar. And here we are looking for XRP. And now, whatever we talked about right now goes into the macro view if you have 2-3 months, if you have patience, if you are learning on a regular basis. But on the short term, we are coming here. We are looking at the market, right? Okay, I want to identify what's happening right now, the short term. Maybe I'm wrong. The volatility can be high. It can get invalidated. But what am I looking at? And that's where things get a little bit interesting, right? This is like a previous level of resistance. And right now it's acting as a resistance. And the price actually shows here that it is moving kind of like a rounded bottom. So that's a possibility which we should not neglect as of now. And if we break this to the downside, that's invalidated. However, we'll have to keep our eyes on the structure because as we just talked about, right, we got a double bottom pattern, which again is a textbook pattern where the second low is higher than the first one, which shows you bulls are much more active than the other where you make similar bottom or a triple bottom where, sellers where they bulls found it hard to kick them out, right? And if that's the case, then literally we are focusing on, okay, we need to see whether we are able to break this range. So here, that's going to be somewhere close to 0.52. Right now, the price is 0.51. So we don't need a big, huge blast to the roof to invalidate the sellers. So, or in other words, give a boost to the buyers. Because if we are breaking to the upside here, that kind of gives us a lot of gold, right? The price can actually move higher. Now, we come back here, we want to actually look at like, okay, what the market is doing. Dow Jones is still here. We are still inside this pattern. We broke out from this corrective pattern, which is actually a bullish stuff. Because when you're looking at a descending broadening wedge, now you can look at this from anywhere, right? You can literally go look at, say, descending broadening wedge. Descending broadening wedge. Okay, what we are going to look at is when this stuff happens in the market, what are you looking at? For me, I'm opening this and I'm seeing like historically speaking, this pattern has a possibility that it would do this, then break higher, do a retest or a consolidation and then move higher. For me, my eyes, I see something similar here. So that's why I have a hard time thinking like, yeah, the job market is still strong in the US. Fed has not stopped hiking the rate. They may still do another 25. They may hammer the market, but the market is showing me something different. So I'm like, okay, what is the market betting on? Whether we understand that fact or not, we understand one thing, that the market is trying to do something positive, right? And this is one of the reasons why I'm looking at the dollar on a weekly and saying like, okay, this does not actually look like a huge bullish structure because this happens to be the previous resistance, which is turning into a current support. And remember, while we were here up at the 115 level, a lot of big YouTubers, big Twitter accounts gave you the idea we are going higher. And I conveyed my thought process saying, okay, we are going to come back down. And I think this is going to be the first level of support. We had our thought process because we are not only looking at horizontal levels, we are also looking for historical trend lines. If this has stayed valid all the way from here, where that was a support which turned into a resistance, so that's from 2004. So literally, we're looking for like 19 years of trend. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going against the history because I'm not smarter than history. If a lot of people have made mistakes in history, they are most likely going to repeat that. Now, what I would look for is the price making a double bottom pattern? Then that would be a red flag, which means the price can bounce before it break back to the downside. That can be a concern because right now we don't know whether the RSI is going to break to the downside or bounce off to test this recent resistance, which would be literally negative for markets, right? But the market is showing you they are completely betting against dollar. Now, as a part of technical analysis, the price action, if it's me, I would go back into the market and I'm looking at the market in a way like, okay, short term, what I'm looking at is this range. We got a red candle or a bear candle which dropped, and it took literally 4 weeks to erase 1 week of bearishness. So for me, I'm like, okay, if that's the equation, it literally is like 1 bear and 4 bulls are equal now, which means the bear is really strong. And the bulls need a lot more energy drinks. So if that's the case, you literally have to wait for this to break to the upside so that the dollar breaks to the downside. But whatever is happening in the macro market is literally impacting the crypto market as well, because as we jump on a lot of different cryptocurrencies on the short term, medium term, macro, we all get to a point where we understand, okay, trend is changing. We can understand the fact that the trend is changing. It's going bullish. You are not going against what the RSI is showing you on a macro level. If this is a previous resistance, most likely that's going to turn into a next level of support. So we have one there and we have one here. Both of them are above 50. So that actually means like, okay, right now we had 63, and if we are dropping towards 55 and bouncing, that still is bullish. And if you're a trend guy, you're most likely looking at this like, okay, if we break to the downside, we may come here. But then we can actually put that argument here. We broke to the upside, which is a positive thing. Now we are coming back to retest. And most likely what happens with whatever we are observing in the market right now is that the market can show you that it is coming back to retest, but then it bounces off. That is what we were discussing. Like the market actually shows you different cycles. It can be the long-term cycle. It can be the short-term cycle. Now, put this into perspective. If this is the short-term cycle, what are we looking at? We got that summer, the blast off in price. Now, short-term, right? So it's not $100. It's a tiny, teeny bit. Then you look for the fall and then the winter. We got that. Now we are in that accumulation range where we are trying to fetch the spring. After which we want to enter into a summer phase. But the key idea here is we need to get a break of this range and then move higher, because the higher time frame structure we move on, we kind of see like, okay, there is a possibility that this can still make a new high and then come back down, because that's wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. If the market is saying, no, we actually have done this as wave 1, then this is wave 2 and wave 3. You may come back down the short-term structure. This is a nano wave structure we are talking, not even the micro. And then we'll bounce off. But when we are staying awake, when we are looking and learning through the market, we have different tools to look at this, right? So on a Heikin Ashi, the 12 hours suggests me like, okay, I'm bullish. I'm not going bearish. Great. I would say, okay, that's actually a good thing to look at. And then I'll put a moving average, which can be like 20-day moving average, 21-day moving average, depending upon how you view the market and what type of a trader or an investor you are. So on a 12 hour, you're below the moving average. That's not positive. and on a daily you're above the moving average, but you still have a lot of gap. That's actually a little bit concerning. Meaning, on that time horizon, on that short term, here you may get rejected. This is literally like you broke below, you are retesting and getting rejected, but still on the daily you come back to the moving average and bounce off. Now look where the price is when you are reaching the moving average. It's 0.48, which for me is like, okay, the monthly we just discussed, it shows me this is a possibility. So even if we bounce off right now and get rejected from 0.54, we may come back down to 0.47, 0.48, whatever the local support is. It can be volatile. We'll have these wicks for sure. So if you are in the market and you're literally looking for things like this, you're learning through that, and you want things to be more clear for a lot of these different assets, which in the macro is turning bullish, that is important, because when you go on a monthly and you understand the fact that it made a local bottom and bounced off, clearly a lot of these assets are showing you massive signals. Say, for example, if you actually take a look at Engine, just for that matter, I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, that looks good. For me, that definitely looks good. When you had this level, which was a resistance, then you broke higher and came back down to test that, and that happens to bring in bulls, putting an engulfing candle, showing bullish structure. So you go on a weekly and you literally see tongue slipping. Sorry. You broke the moving average, you came back, you are respecting the moving average, and you're trying to bounce off. Look for the reverse. You broke the moving average, you went back to retest that, you got rejected, you dropped. And that drop was a heavy drop compared to the first one. So this was like a 75% drop, from which you actually dropped another 82. That's to the downside, so you get my point. Now look for the opposite. When you're doing something similar, you break the moving average, you come back, retest that and bounce. That's where you get the momentum. And that's something you really don't want to miss, because of the fact that in this time horizon where we are looking at the market, we got the summer, we got the fall, we got the winter, and we are trying to go into the summer from the spring. So keep in mind, as soon as you see these levels of supports are holding up and you are going up, above and beyond, that's a literally bullish signal for me. I can be wrong, but that's what I'm looking in the market. And we are going through a ton of these assets, identifying, okay, that's actually bullish. This is running up. This is happening with this asset. The macro is changing. The micro is looking good. Micro is looking bad. Macro is looking good. All of these structures, if you are interested in that, you can look at the Patreon. The link is given in the description below. So guys, if you received value, please do hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done that already. I'll meet you guys on the next video. Bye for now.